morning.
Hi, here we are at the historical celebration for the Presbyterian, South Salem Presbyterian Church, and we are glad to welcome everybody in town here. We're hoping that more people come to see all of the wonderful documents that have been found in the vault, which luckily were saved from the fire way back in 1973. And standing to my right is the current pastor of the church, Chip Andrus.
Hello.
And to my left is our town supervisor, Peter Parsons.
Hi. I try to avoid being part of the exhibit.
But not old enough, Peter, not old enough. But around the room, we have the original deed for the church, dated in 1751. We have all sorts of documents and letters and, I guess, deeds. I don't know. You might want to say what Judy has found.
Judy found quite a few deeds from property around the church area, all of which end in the 25th year of his Lord George, King of England, George II, King of England. So the deeds that we've recovered for this property, for Josiah Gilbert's property, and some other property around the area date back before we were a nation. And some of these deeds mark the property by different types of trees and rocks and fences and houses. It's pretty incredible. And we've also recovered handwritten sermons from Solomon Mead dating back to 1752. He would write these sermons on what looks like a 5x7 index card. Of course, he didn't go to the drugstore and buy these, but he would tape these little pieces of cardboard together and fold them out, and it looked like the sermons probably lasted about 12 minutes. So these had to be cryptic notes, I'm sure. But we have several of these handwritten sermons. We haven't translated them yet. They're in Old English. You can read most of them, but that's going to be something we want to do for next year, is to have a couple of these completely translated,
really good,
so that you can see exactly what he was saying, or at least what his notes were.
Okay. Well, also we have a table from the Mite Society, which was a society formed in 1815 by the women of the Presbyterian Church. Not just this Presbyterian Church. I think it was a Presbyterian thing to do. The Mite Society was named for the gospel story about the widow's mite, how somebody who couldn't afford to devote something to charity, to donate something to charity, would donate what she had, and like the rich people could donate, and it wouldn't really take away from their daily lives. But the widow donated all she had for her love of God and other people. Anyway, to join the Mite Society, you paid 50 cents a year, and it was only for women. They would give to a charity of their choice at the end of the year.
And that society,
and the dues have never increased.
Well, it began with 2 cents, and it has increased. But November 15th, 6 days ago, was the actual 200th anniversary of the Mite Society.
Right, and in honor of that, they came to see me at my house, and since Molly Mead lived there, and Molly Mead was, I think, the first president of the society. Anyway, instrumental in its formation, you can see a picture of Molly Mead at the Mite table. There are tables of old scrapbooks from the members of the church. There are other things around. Out of the town historian's collection, there are several quilts. 2 date from 1851, from the time of before the Civil War. 1 dates from the 1930s. There are farming instruments. There's some Civil War memorabilia. There's a wedding dress from Emily Hoyt, who was married in 1900, and the Hoyts were members of the church probably for 200 years. There is a table about the fire in 1973. Which shows the church before, the church after, and the church during that horrible fire in January of 1973.
Okay. Yeah,
keep the cartridge box away from the heat.
Okay, my name is Larry Maxwell. I'm with the Living History Guild, and this is Lawrence Wood. We are reenactors, some people call us that, or living historians. We're representing New Yorkers that fought in the Revolutionary War. And we're here today because this is the 200th anniversary celebration for the Presbyterian Church here. They've asked us to come because in the graveyard in the back here are buried some Revolutionary War veterans. When the Revolutionary War broke out in 1775, the men in this area joined the 4th New York Regiment. And I'm with the 4th New York Regiment. We have a couple more reenactors that are around here today. They fought under this flag. A lot of people aren't familiar with it. And this is called the Liberty flag. There's 13 stripes. There's no canton in the corner. You'll find this from 75 all the way till the end of the war. The uniforms we're wearing, you see, are quite different. General Washington, when the war started, he asked all of the soldiers to wear a hunting frock. That's what he's wearing here. And New Yorkers wrote back to him and said, "What's that?" It wasn't something we wore in the North at the time. It was something that was used in Pennsylvania and Virginia. It was psychological warfare. Washington thought if the British saw us in this outfit, they're going to think we're marksmen, like the men were in the French and Indian War. So, but the New Yorkers, later on, some New Yorkers did end up with these. But originally they end up with the regimental coats, which are, a little fashionable thing. The kind of hat he's wearing is a very common hat. Some people refer to it as a tricorn. That's not correct. A tricorn actually is closed like that. It's shaped like a triangle. This is called a cocked hat. And it's a fashionable hat. Has no practical purpose. I mean, in the winter it'll keep your head a little warm, but it doesn't keep the snow off, the rain off. And by the end of the war, that hat is replaced with this. And in 1778, Henry Livingston, who was the colonel of the 4th New York Regiment, he asked for this uniform, this is the men from this area, in honor of the French alliance. French wore white uniforms, and he said, I want to have white uniforms faced in red, and I want to have light infantry caps for my men. And this is the same hat with the other pieces cut off. It's the ancestor of the baseball cap. So by the end of the Revolutionary War, they're wearing these. This on top here is horsehair. It's not, somebody asked me today if it was a scalp. It's horsehair. And why horsehair? It's not to keep the bugs away. Julius Caesar had discovered that horsehair deflects swords. So if I go after you with a sword and the sword hits the horsehair, it slides away. So it's actually armor. So they then had these hats, and the little white cockade, if you notice, he's earlier in the war. This is showing that he got paid. They'd stick their money in their hat here. And sometimes it was an identification because he doesn't really have anything on that says Continental Army. You might think you're looking at a loyalist here. You can't tell. There's nothing, there wasn't any identifying thing. So the money in the hat was a symbol. Now, when the loyalists learned that, in a couple of battles, they slipped money in their hat to sneak up on our men. You'll also notice the glasses he's wearing. Most people that needed glasses didn't survive very long. And, but when they did, they were these round type. So I'm glad to see that a lot of reenactors today are wearing the wrong thing. You'll also see we're both clean shaven. Occasionally you'll see reenactors with beards on. For some reason back then, there was no hair on the face. Even mountain men didn't wear beards. Clean shaven was the look. Also, you may say, wait a minute, Revolutionary War, where's your long hair? We're New Yorkers. General Howe, when he came here from England, looked at the New Yorkers and said, they're a bunch of roundheads. They don't have the hair on their head longer than an inch. Why? Well, in England there were two parties, the Whigs and the Tories. And the Whigs were in favor of our cause, the Tories were opposed. But they were all part of the Church of England. Part of the Revolutionary War was a religious war. And the Church of England, they referred to Jews and Baptists as non-people. They called Catholics Papists, and in New York State you couldn't even celebrate Mass. So in response and reaction to the British with their long ponytails, New Yorkers cut their hair short. And General Howe comes over and he observes that, and yet within a few months he realizes that does a good job of keeping the lice down, so he orders the entire British Army to cut their hair short. So we do this to help keep history alive. People can reenact, whether they're children, whether they're adults, men or women, and we do different time periods too. I'm with the 4th New York, he's with the 5th New York, and these are regiments. You can look them up online. You can look up the 5th New York Regiment, you can look up the 4th New York Regiment or Living History Guild, and you could get involved with hands-on doing history correctly, and it's an exciting thing.
Here we are in the graveyard of South Salem Presbyterian Church. The difference between a graveyard and a cemetery is that in a graveyard by a church, all of the people who are buried here were members of the church, as opposed to a cemetery, which is a public place of burial. Many of the members of this church fought in the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, and French Indian War, and there are 27 veterans that are buried here in this graveyard. There are 3 different types of stones in the graveyard, marking different time periods of stone cutting in the area. The oldest are the slate stones with the old death faces. These are stones from a stone cutter in Boston, and these are the oldest graves that we have. And then the next oldest graves are brownstones, and there's several of those that are here, and they're the most easily read gravestones that we have. And then, of course, there's the marble stones, which are a later period. And oddly enough, the marble, even though it's the youngest stones, are the hardest to read. These slate stones and the brownstones are much better preserved. We preserve the whole graveyard. A guy named Jonathan Appel came and restored the entire graveyard 3 years ago, and last year we became registered on the National Register of Historic Places here, not only for our veterans but for the people who have served at this church since 1752. And it's a testimony to all those who have gone before and who are members of this church. And our historical day here is to celebrate not only that, but the fact that we hope to be here for many years to come as a central part of this area where we serve. We're standing next to the grave of Jacob Gilbert. He's buried next to his wife, Mary Gilbert. These two lived on Main Street, right before Bowden Road, right at that intersection. When Major Andre was arrested, he was brought to Jacob and Mary's house, and we have a chair that's from that house. That's possibly where Major Andre sat when he wrote a letter to George Washington, telling George who he was. He was arrested in plain clothes, in civilian clothes, but he was actually an officer of the British, but a spy. He was carrying the plans of West Point that Benedict Arnold had given him. This is how Benedict Arnold got busted. He wrote to George Washington in Jacob Gilbert's house, right here on Main Street, requesting to be turned over as a prisoner of war, and if not, to be put in front of a firing squad instead of being hung like a common criminal. George Washington, of course, denied both requests, and they took him, I believe, to Tappan Hill and hung him the next day. This is in September of 1780. And Jacob, of course, is a veteran of the Revolutionary War, one of many here in the graveyard at South Salem. And all of you are welcome to come and walk around the graveyard. And just by reading these graves, you find out so much history of the area, of all of these people who served as Presbyterians here in this church, the South Salem Presbyterian Church, since 1752.
Good day. My name is Ann Enslow. This is my husband, Ridley Enslow. We are delighted to be here with you today to bring you some music from the American colonial period. My father actually grew up in South Salem. And when I was a little girl, I would come to visit my grandmother at her house here. So for me, this is like a homecoming. So we were delighted to be asked to participate in this wonderful event here at the church. And we hope you've had time to look at the room with all the historic documents, which are very, very impressive, and take a tour of the graveyard. So we are going to start off with a song from the reign of Queen Anne. It starts, "Here's a health to the Queen and a lasting peace." But despite all of those toasts to her health, poor Queen Anne did not do so well. Although she bore 18 children, every one of them died in childhood or infancy. so that by the time she herself passed away in 1714, the succession passed to her cousins, the Hanovers, George I, George II, and George III. And the rest, as they say,
is history.
Thank you.
Here's a health to the Queen and a lasting peace, to faction an end, to wealth increase. Come, let us drink it while we have breath, for there's no drinking after death. And he that will this toast deny, down among the dead men, down among the dead men, down, 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 down among the dead men, let him lie. Their charming beauties health go round, in whom celestial joys are found, and may confusion still pursue the senseless woman hating crew. They that woman's health deny, down among the dead men, down among the dead men, down, 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 down among the dead men, let them lie. In smiling Bacchus, joys I'll roll, deny no pleasure to my soul. Let Bacchus's health round swiftly move, for Bacchus is a friend to love. And he that will this health deny, down among the dead men, down among the dead men, down, 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 down among the dead men, let him lie.
Farewell and adieu to you Spanish ladies, farewell and adieu, ye ladies of Spain, for we've received orders for to sail for old England. We hope very shortly we'll see you again. We'll rant and we'll roar like true old young sailormen, rant and we'll roar on deck and below, for until we sight Lizard off the coast of old England, straight up the channel to Portsmouth we'll go. Now I've been a topman and I've been a gutter snake. I can dance, I can sing, I can walk the jib boom, I can handle the cutlass and carve a fine figure. Whenever I'm in a long boat standing room, we'll rant and we'll roar like true old young sailormen, rant and we'll roar on deck and below, for until we sight Lizard off the coast of old England, straight up the channel to Portsmouth we'll go. girls, as fine as you wish, and one pretty lady chewing tobacco, like the young kitten chewing on fish. Meow. We'll rant and we'll roar like true bold young sailormen, rant and we'll roar on deck and below, for until we sight lizard off the coast of old England, straight up the channel to Portsmouth we'll go. Thank you very much. We'd like to say a few words about the instruments that we're playing here this afternoon. I'm playing a hammered dulcimer. Hammered because I play with little wooden hammers. And dulcimer is a word that's part Greek, part Latin. It means sweet melody, and we hope you agree. Thank you. That was the right answer. The only problem with this instrument is that there are 100 strings on here, and you have to tune every one of them each time you play the instrument. If there are any guitar players here, it's kind of like a guitar in that way because it is a wooden instrument, and every time the heat and humidity change, the wood expands and contracts, and you have to retune. So much as I hate to admit it, there is a saying about hammered dulcimer players that they spend half their time tuning and the other half playing out of tune.
I'll vouch for that. And this, of course, is a fiddle. It was the most popular instrument in the colonies. And why was that? Because it's easy to carry, it only has 4 strings, it takes about 15 seconds to tune. I rest my case. So of all of our instruments, this is the only authentic instrument actually built in the 18th century. This was built in 1776 by Claude François Villaume in France. We hope you enjoy the sound of this violin today.
I have to add, though, that violin might have been the most popular instrument. However, a woman would not have played it in the 18th century. There were definite gender roles for different types of instruments. Ones where you did not look beautiful and graceful playing would not have been played by a woman, and the thought was that you had this very sort of contorted position when you played violin. So there. We're going to show off the instruments a little bit. We also play for a couple of colonial dance groups, and recently one of them gave us this melody of marches that we like. So. siege was sent to occupy the port city of Boston. And then in April of 1775, he received orders to march out of Boston to Concord, where he was to seize a cache of arms, and then go on to Lexington to take the rebel leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock. But Paul Revere, along with William Dawes and Samuel Prescott, rode ahead and spread the word that they were coming, so that by the time the British arrived, the American Minutemen were ready for them, and they sent those British troops packing back to Boston. Now, in strategic terms, this was a very small victory. However, it really boosted the spirits of the colonists because they had just scored a victory over the greatest army in the world, the British Army. So shortly after that, this taunting song appeared in a local newspaper. It was called The Irishman's Epistle to the Officers and Troops at Boston. It was signed simply, Patty. By my faith, but I think you're all makers of fools with your brains and your bridges, your guts and your skulls. Get hold of your muskets and put up your swords. Look in your books for the meaning of words. You see, in my heart is so much of mistaken, for conquered by discord can never be beaten. How brave you untalked with your muskets all bright, and thought to be frightened the folks with the fight. But when you got there, how they powdered your plums, all the way home how they peppered your bums. And isn't it funny, some comical cheer, to be proud in the face and be shot in the rear? We're not making this up. And what have you got now with all your designing but a town without victuals to sit down and dine in, and look on the ground like a parcel of noodles and sing how the Yankees have beaten the Doodles. I'm sure if you're wise you'll be pleased for a dinner, for fighting and fasting will soon make you thinner.
You're watching Lewisboro Community Television, Channel 20.